promises to the American people. This feud between these two guys is extraordinarily concerning.
Steve, I just got to come back, though. Do you really not believe the president lies just regularly? I mean, you know, whether he, lies, I guess, means he knows what he's saying is not true. But, you know, even just last week, saying about, you know, his calling all the families. Now the White House has to play catch up on that.
Exaggerates. I think the American people kind of understand when he's exaggerating. It drives the press crazy. You made this point earlier about the fact that he acts like a jerk.
When he says he has private investigators in Hawaii researching Donald Trump.
But let me say this point about him being a jerk, because this is one of the things I always tell people about Donald Trump. You know, I've been around politicians my entire life. 98% of politicians are jerks in private and, you know, wonderful people in public. Trump is, in a lot of ways, the opposite. You know, he is an incredibly sweet and gracious person in private, and in public, sometimes he does act like a jerk. And that's very different than most politicians.
Well, it's a shame most people won't meet him privately.
Yeah. Well, if they did, they'd know what I mean.
Let's take a quick break. The president's latest move on the Russia probe. As Russia probe continues in Congress and with the special counsel, President Trump has reportedly pledged almost $500,000 to cover his staffers' legal fees. The trouble is most of those staffers would be considered witnesses. It would be highly unusual in almost any case for the man on trial to pay for the lawyers of those potentially testifying against him. Back now with our panel, Matt Lewis joins us as well. Scott, I mean, I know you worked in the White House. Is this kind of a whole can of worms?
Well, there's a lot going on here because most White House staffers, I'm sure, are surprised to find out when an investigation starts, the White House counsel does not represent you. You have to go out and get your own lawyer. And speaking from personal experience, you can easily rack up legal fees in the six figures. The multiple six figures, you may have committed no crime. You may merely be a witness. But interviewing with the special counsel, congressional committees, talking to the White House counsel, and then if the Democrats were to take control of a chamber next November, that ratchets it up again. So you can easily get into the six figures. So given the number of people who are likely to be interviewed, $430,000 is going to be, I think, a collective drop in the bucket. Staff cannot accept pro bono legal help while they are working at the White House. So these lawyers do have to be paid. I think it's a good gesture of loyalty by the president, but the legal bills here are likely to go well beyond.
I would just warn them, because there's a guy that was promised $25,000 who finally did get it today. But this is a pattern. I mean, Donald Trump 2 years ago in Iowa, when he was having a rally, advised his crowd, you know, knock the crap out of them. I promise you I'll pay the legal fees. There was a guy in North Carolina who actually took him up on it, sucker punched somebody, a protester at a rally. Then Donald Trump swore, I never said that. I never said I was going to pay his legal fees.
But he never lies.
This is a suggestion of hush money. Let's go back to basics. You cannot be under investigation for possible obstruction of justice. You're the President of the United States, and you are saying to those who are also may or may not be under investigation, I'm going to give you money for your legal bills. It is unacceptable. It goes back to the conduct of someone who has no regard for the law, for protocol, for precedent.
Does he know that, and he's just raising it because it's a kind of a morale booster, but then there's no intention?
I spoke to an old White House counsel that I served with today about whether this is permissible. And he said it's legally murky, but you could make an argument for it. And I said, well, if you were the White House counsel, would you advise it? And he said, no, I probably wouldn't advise it the opposite.
But we're missing. At a minimum, it's unethical.
Yeah, but it's loyal. It's loyal. I mean, my reaction to this is this is an act of loyalty of a president who's standing up for the people who served him. I don't, you know, this issue about whether it's ethical.
But it's unethical. So you're saying, but it's also unethical.
Well, look, I mean, that's for the lawyers. I'm not a lawyer.
Are you saying
but I'm saying if I served in the White House and I was under investigation for my service to the president, the president said, I'm going to help pay your legal bills, I would think he was being loyal.
What I'm trying to say is that it's unethical, and I think most ethicists would agree with that.
But isn't there a legal counsel that's going to decide that?
No, hey,
it's a question of right and wrong.
Let her finish. She's in the middle of something.
Forget it.
Sorry.
Just go on.
No.
Well, I would say 2 points. We're missing the real scandal, which is $430,000 of RNC money is being used to defend Donald Trump and Donald Jr. That's where $430,000 went that Trump is now offering to pony up his own money for. So every time the RNC wrote these emails to little old ladies all across America saying send us $3 or $5 to fund the border wall, you were paying Trump's legal bills. That's number one. Number two, since we have Carl here, during Watergate, if John Dean or Alexander Butterfield had gotten their legal counsel from the president, we would have never been able to connect the dots between the Watergate break-in and the White House cover-up, or the fact that there were tapes. That probably would have been missing. So being paid off by the president to get legal advice is a recipe to be the fall guy.
Hold on, but Kirsten, you're saying without a doubt it's unethical.
Yeah, it is unethical, and every time I say it's unethical, you interrupt me to scream about loyalty. So it's like, why don't you address the fact that it's unethical, and the fact that, I think if you're being honest about it, this is somebody who is trying to coerce people into testifying in a certain way. I mean, it's pretty obvious what he's doing. This is not a man who likes to open up his wallet.
So my point was that
let him respond.
My point is, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. You might be right that this is legally unethical and he's not going to be able to do it. My point was that I think it's a very loyal thing to do, to stand up for the people who stood up for you. And that's what I would want.
This is a president. Loyalty is not.
But see, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, he's not loyal to the people who serve him, and then he does this. Well,
but trying to control their lawyers who give them legal advice when it's an investigation into the president's lawyers are not going to have the staffers' best interests in mind. Their biggest client is the president. So, yeah, it might seem nice, but it's probably the worst thing that these aides could do.
Also, loyalty is not go out and justify my actions for me on television. I'm going to undercut you the next day by saying what you've said is not true.
Our whole discussion for the last hour is really fascinating because what unites every question is about right and wrong. Basic right and wrong. And one time after another, consistently, this president, this aberrant president, acts aberrantly and chooses wrong. He chooses wrong over right that children most often know. This is extraordinary.
I think I was going to say real quick, I think it's a bad idea. But I am worried about the brain drain. I am worried about what happens when staffers are basically, you get the memo, like if you go to work in a White House, you could end up bankrupt. Yeah. That's a bad thing.
That's a really good question. It has nothing to do with the right and wrong question here. We need to have a way that people can defend themselves pro bono, all kinds of ways. You can even start a PAC or go ahead, go that way. But the President of the United States, the same president who pardoned somebody in Arizona and suggests to others that through that pardon, well, you might get pardoned in the Russia matter as well. This is all of a piece. The dots keep getting connected.
We got to take another break. Coming up, a secret payout.